Gather around the campfire, everyone, and let me share the stirring tale of Frederick Douglass, a man whose voice for justice echoed louder than the chains of slavery. His story isn't just a narrative of escape and freedom, it's a powerful testament to the unyielding pursuit of truth and equality. Born into slavery around 1818 in Maryland, Frederick Douglass was not originally known by the name we remember him by. He was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, a name whispered to him by a mother he barely knew, as slave children were often separated from their families at a young age. The shackles of slavery tried to bind his body and spirit, but even as a young boy, Frederick exhibited a fierce intellect and an indomitable will. Imagine a young Frederick, secretly learning to read and write from scraps of newspapers, and occasionally from the kinder white children he encountered. Knowledge was his first gateway to freedom. It opened his eyes to the world beyond the fields and the injustices that chained his people. By the time he was a teenager, Frederick was teaching other slaves to read, using the Bible as his textbook. This act was forbidden and dangerous, but he knew that education was the key to emancipation, not just for himself, but for all who were enslaved. The turning point in Frederick's life came when he was around 20 years old. After several failed attempts, he finally escaped slavery by boarding a northbound train, disguised as a sailor, with papers he had borrowed from a free black seaman. Imagine the pounding of his heart, the tense silence broken only by the steady clack of the train tracks, each click and clack a step closer to freedom. Upon reaching the free state of New York, he declared himself Frederick Douglass, a new name for a new life. In New York, he married Anna Murray, a free black woman who had helped him escape. Together, they moved to Massachusetts, where Douglass became involved with the abolitionist movement, transforming his personal quest for freedom into a lifelong crusade for the liberation of all enslaved people. Douglass became a key figure in the abolitionist movement, known for his eloquent and fiery speeches that captivated audiences and challenged the conscience of a nation. Picture him, a former slave, standing before crowds of white spectators, his voice thundering over them as he recounted the horrors of slavery and demanded justice and equality. His words were so potent and his demeanor so commanding that some listeners doubted he had ever been a slave, a skepticism he addressed by publishing his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This book not only silenced his critics, but also increased his influence, becoming a critical tool in the abolitionist movement. Douglass's advocacy wasn't limited to oratory. He advised presidents and guided fledgling abolitionists. During the Civil War, he worked tirelessly to ensure that the fight would end slavery, and he was instrumental in recruiting black soldiers for the Union Army, believing that their service would help earn them equal rights as citizens. After the war, Douglass continued to fight for justice, turning his attention to the women's suffrage movement. He famously argued that he could not accept the right to vote as a black man if women, white or black, were denied the same right. His speeches not only highlighted the struggles of African Americans, but also linked them to the broader global fight for universal human rights. As the fire dies down, let's remember that Frederick Douglass's legacy is not confined to the pages of history books. It lives on in every challenge to injustice, in every fight for equality, and in the continuous quest for the betterment of humanity. His life reminds us of the power of voice, the importance of truth, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. So here's to Frederick Douglass, a beacon of hope and a warrior for justice, whose life story inspires us to keep fighting, keep speaking out, and keep striving for a better world. Cheers to a true hero of freedom. As our fire continues to crackle, let's explore the later years of Frederick Douglass's life and the enduring impact of his work, painting a fuller picture of a man whose influence stretched far beyond the abolition of slavery. After the Civil War, Douglass continued to be a leading voice for the rights of African Americans and women, his activism undimmed by the passing years. He held several public offices, breaking racial barriers and setting precedents. Douglass was appointed to high-ranking federal positions, including that of the U.S. Marshal for the District of Columbia and later the district's Recorder of Deeds. He also served as the U.S. Minister Resident and Consul General to Haiti, reflecting his stature as both a national and international advocate for justice and human rights. Imagine Douglass, now a seasoned statesman, still speaking with the same fiery passion that had defined his younger years, but tempered with the wisdom gained through decades of advocacy. He used his positions not only to argue for the rights of Black Americans, but also to embody the capabilities and potential of African Americans in leadership roles, challenging the prevailing prejudices of the times. Douglass's personal life also evolved in these later years. After the death of his wife Anna in 1882, Douglass married Helen Pitts in 1884, a white feminist and abolitionist. Their marriage was a bold statement in an era of significant racial prejudice and segregation, exemplifying his lifelong commitment to challenging societal boundaries and norms. His home in Cedar Hill, in Anacostia, Washington, D.C., became a hub for thinking and activism, where Douglass entertained guests ranging from grassroots activists to international leaders. The home is preserved today as a National Historic Site, serving as a testament to his enduring legacy. Douglass continued to write and speak publicly, his later writings and speeches touching on issues ranging from civil rights to human liberty. His voice remained a powerful call for justice during the Reconstruction era, and he was a harsh critic of the discriminatory laws and practices that continued to oppress African Americans. One of his most significant contributions during this period was his influence on the evolving definitions of liberty and equality in America. Through his newspaper, the North Star, and other writings, he pushed for a broad vision of inclusive freedom that went beyond race to include all oppressed peoples. His thoughts on equality, democracy, and human rights influenced generations of activists who followed. As we reflect by the glow of our fading campfire, it's clear that Frederick Douglass was not just a product of his time, but a man who transcended it. His strategies and words shaped the course of American social and political life, setting a benchmark for the civil rights movements that would follow. Douglass was not only a key figure in abolishing slavery, but also in defining American ideals of freedom and equality in the Constitution's post-Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which aimed to eradicate the vestiges of slavery and guarantee equal rights under the law. Douglass's death in 1895 did not end his influence. A century and more later, his life and work continue to inspire those who fight against oppression and strive for true equality. His legacy challenges us to pursue justice and equality relentlessly, and to never be silent in the face of injustice. So tonight, as we remember Frederick Douglass, let's carry forward the torch of his commitment to justice and equality. Let's be inspired by his dedication, his courage, and his unwavering belief in the dignity of all human beings. Here's to Frederick Douglass, a titan of American history, whose spirit burns as brightly as our campfire tonight. Cheers to a legacy that forever lights the way.